The best of Money Matters. The Big Story.
Welcome to The Big Story. I'm Hongbin Jeong. China has just put on quite a show in Beijing today. Down the historic Changan Avenue, tanks rolled, missiles were paraded, and rows of troops marched in step to mark the 80th anniversary of China's victory over Japan in World War II. President Xi Jinping gave a speech from the Tiananmen rostrum on Victory Day, then rode past the troops in a parade car, his third big military parade since taking office. The show wasn't just for China's own citizens, though. The rostrum sat world leaders like Russia's Vladimir Putin and North Korea's Kim Jong-un, making the parade as much about geopolitics as it was about commemoration. So what message was China trying to send with this spectacle? And how should the rest of the world be reading it? Well, joining us today to share more is Professor Lim Tai Wei, East Asian expert at Soka University. Hi, Professor. Welcome to the show.
Glad to be here with you.
All right, Professor, I just want to start off by asking you, what stood out to you most about this parade? Was it the scale, the weaponry, or the foreign leaders in attendance?
Well, the parade had several unprecedented features. First was the first time that three leaders of DPRK, Russia and China met together, and there was this photographic angle that captured the moment, which was broadcasted to the rest of the world. That was unprecedented because apparently, historically, they have never met in person for three at the same time. There's also some meeting that they may have a formal meeting after the parade. We shall see if that happens. Secondly, it is also in terms of scale, the largest parade that has ever taken place in terms of Chinese military parade, especially for victory parade. So that's something unprecedented as well. And finally, there are 26 world leaders in attendance, and the sight of them walking through Forbidden City to the parade viewing platform is also something that is a sight because the number of foreign participants appears to be also one of the largest, if not unprecedented, in history as well. So all three taken together makes this unprecedented, large-scale military parade something that is, rather unusual.
Well, given the parade today, what message is Beijing trying to send to its domestic audience and to the rest of the world by staging such a massive military spectacle?
For the domestic audience, the messaging is quite clear that China has come of age and that it has emerged out of the humiliation of 150 years, that not only is it able to defend itself, but now it is a great power on the world stage, and that all these are made possible because of the leadership of the party. Therefore, the legitimacy of the party holds in the coming anniversary celebration that's coming up, whether it's of the party or the founding of People's Republic or the founding of the military. For the external audiences, it shows that at least officially it conveys quite openly the message that China cannot be bullied and that it is a force, it can be a force either for peace or for warfare, and therefore it is best, to engage with China in peace rather than, having conflicts with it. And it also shows that, in terms of its relations with big powers, that it is to be respected and that it's to be treated as an equal amongst the great powers.
I mean, this is to mark the 80th anniversary of China's victory over Japan in World War II. So, is China's World War II narrative still important among the Chinese citizens, though, especially now during a time of economic slowdown and geopolitical pressures?
Well, the construction of its World War II narrative is tuned towards buttressing the legitimacy of the party. It wants to convey through patriotic education and nationalism. Some say, particularly from President Jiang Zemin's time, that the party made it possible to stand up and achieve a victory in what it calls the anti-fascist war in the 1930s and 1945. This is the narrative it has constructed since the founding of the People's Republic, and for particularly the party information disseminators, this constructed narrative is very important for them because it forms the foundation of the party and that the party can continue to defend China against external threats henceforth. Therefore, in terms of legitimacy of the party, it is foundational.
Professor, I also want to take a quick look at President Xi Jinping's opening speech from the Tiananmen rostrum. Now, President Xi positioned China as self-reliant and unstoppable in its national rejuvenation. So, Professor, how does Xi's emphasis on self-reliance reflect China's response to current economic challenges?
Well, self-reliance is not new. In fact, in the early days of the founding of the People's Republic, they faced sort of isolation from the two great superpowers during the bipolar Cold War. For example, since 1949 up till 1972, the People's Republic was actually under US and Western embargo. And from the 1960s to 1989, it was facing a Sino-Soviet split. And so it was effectively on its own, in those years, spurned by two great superpowers. And that's where the origins of self-reliance came from. And through self-reliance, at least from the narrative, they appear to have survived despite not being aligned with any of the poles in the Cold War era. This narrative of self-reliance is again revived, particularly under President Xi's rule, where he has made it a priority to, for example, construct the basic technologies that China needs on its own through the Made in China 2025 plan. And now it wants not only to be self-reliant on its own self-made indigenous technology, but it wants to be the standard which global technologies are based on, and therefore there's this contestation of technology, particularly advanced technologies from Industry 4.0 to 4.5 and beyond 5.0, for example, to set the global standards for such technologies. And that's the ambitions that China has, moving forward not only in terms of self-reliance, but in setting global standards for the next generations of technologies.
But how might other global powers interpret China's emphasis on independence and resilience? I mean, does this signal that China is taking a more assertive stance internationally, or is it primarily a message of domestic confidence?
It has certainly reached the eyes and ears of other global powers, particularly, current de facto superpower, which is the United States. And the United States, perhaps since the end of the Obama era, has been shoring up its domestic strength in order to manage what it sees as an increasing multipolarity of the world order. And therefore, there has been a very strong, particularly strong alliance creation with its traditional allies and partners since the end of Obama, but certainly supercharged during the Joe Biden administration. And in terms of the two, DJT-1 and DJT-2 Trump administrations, they have also shored up, the MAGA elements as well to bring supply chains back or near, at least to a friendly entity to the U.S., commonly known as a friendshoring, nearshoring, or onshoring, and also to build up its military capabilities so that it can maintain an edge against a near-peer competitor. So certainly all these have sparked competitive impulses and instincts in the West and its allies and partners. And so we are likely to see a greater contestation and rivalry in an increasingly multipolar world that's experiencing multiple crises.
It looks like President Xi also mentioned that the world must never return to the law of the jungle where the strong prey on the weak. Which country or countries might feel targeted with his stance here?
From the Chinese perspective, which actually aligns with the perspective of, say, the DPRK or Russia, and they have openly mentioned this, and they have openly used this word, which is they want to move away from Eurocentric, Western-centric world into what they call a more equitable world order, in which they, as non-liberal democracies, can play a bigger role, and also self-appoint themselves as, representatives of the global South, so that they can create an order in which they think is more equitable, that is not dominated by the West or by this so-called Eurocentric model. So that's the thinking that they have. As for the other side, they want to sort of actually consolidate and maintain the current world order and to be able to pull important players within the global South to their side. In the past, it had been India, but it appears there are challenges that have come up recently with India, and we are quite likely to see the courting of entities like India and other sort of non-aligned or omnidirectional or multi-aligned entities in the world between the two sides. One side led by the Chinese, Russia, and DPRK and Iran, some would call Axis or faction, and the other side by the West.
Right. And as you mentioned earlier in our conversation, one striking image of the parade was President Xi flanked by Russia's Vladimir Putin and North Korea's Kim Jong-un. Now, this is the first known time, as you mentioned, that the three leaders are meeting together, right? So how symbolic was that moment, though? And what kind of message does it send to Washington and its allies?
This is extremely symbolic because it has never happened before. And it also pulls together the world's two great nuclear powers together. And Russia is actually the world's largest nuclear power, aligning with the third largest nuclear power in the world, and together with much smaller nuclear power like North Korea. It also aligns the world's second largest economy in nominal parity and the first largest economy in purchasing power parity, together with the fourth or fifth largest economy in the world in purchasing power parity, which is Russia. So this, as you know, Russia is also a major resource superpower. China has the world's second largest population. So if you take all these superlative qualities together, the alignment, I would say alignment because at least officially, China does not believe in alliances. It believes in alignment. And so the alignments between these three entities actually brings together very powerful criteria and qualities of three countries that can pose a challenge, if not an alternative pole to the prevailing Western-led world order.
Right. And for Kim Jong-un here, I mean, in particular, this was his first time at such a multilateral, event. And he's also brought his daughter to the event as well. How significant was this?
This is especially watched very closely by South Korea. And South Korea is a major player in the region, together with the US and Japan. These three countries have been watching North Korea very closely, and one of the items that they watch for is succession plan. So apparently, since, at least a year or more ago, it has been observed that the daughter, Ju Wei, of the North Korean leader, the apparent successor that follows him to a major event within North Korea, and this is probably the first time that we actually see the daughter appearing in an official event with the leader himself. Given that Mr. Kim does not travel overseas, frequently, in fact, it is very rare for him to do so, and the fact that he brought his daughter along is taken by many in South Korea and other stakeholders as a signal that she is being groomed to be the next successor. And the reason why, the succession as well as the appearance of Mr. Kim in such an important event is because DPRK wants to be recognized as a nuclear power, and some would estimate they have dozens of nuclear weapons already. Given that nuclear weapons are involved, it provides a lot of incentives for analysts and intelligence agencies to watch every move very carefully in this parade. On top of that, there has been new developments in the last few months where North Korea has become an actual combatant in Russia's war against Ukraine. And this complicates the matter even more because now we see a Northeast Asian power or an East Asian power actually involved in a European war, and after being involved in the European war, it has been rewarded with advanced technologies that has seen the North Korean arsenals improve by leaps and bounds. We can see that they have not only space programs, cruise missiles, launch a new vertical launch missile frigate, and many other new weaponry to sort of observe. So this lends a lot of incentives for stakeholders to watch every movement in the parade very carefully.
Okay. Well, you did mention earlier in our conversation as well that the three, President Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, and Kim Jong-un, there are no set date for talks yet, but do you think they will hold trilateral talks? And if they do, what could possibly on the agenda?
Quite a number of observers think that they may have high probability of a trilateral talk in Beijing, whether it is a public one or a corridor, much more behind-the-scenes talk. And the likelihood in terms of the topics that we discuss, would be the latest updates on the Russo-Ukraine conflict. There will also be discussions on how three countries will want to react to a possible request that has been made by President Trump to meet up with Mr. Kim, and now especially with what is perceived as a China-friendly, DPRK-friendly, left-wing progressive President Lee in South Korea. He may be a facilitator of such a meeting. Therefore, they probably want to have some form of a coordinated front. They are likely to talk about the multiple conflict which has happened in the world, where they are either involved as mediators, weapon suppliers, or, actual, some would call them to be the proxies of the great powers. And these are the wars that are, for example, between Israel versus Iran and the proxies. Wars like, what has happened between Thailand and Cambodia, Azerbaijan and Armenia, Rwanda and Congo, and India and Pakistan. So they are quite likely to, discuss such developments and think about some form of coordination, if not updating each other on the latest developments.
Well, other than this, though, China unveiled some eye-catching new weapons, including hypersonic-capable missiles, a new ICBM, and even robotic dog drones. Now, Professor, the People's Liberation Army hasn't fought a war in decades. So what do these reveal about the PLA's strategic ambitions?
Well, the weapon systems certainly dazzle the eyes of analysts because these are seen to be very advanced weapon systems, some of which may even surpass the U.S. capabilities, or at least perceived to surpass. We're talking about advanced drones, hypersonic missiles, AI development, and also new ICBM missiles. Some analysts would consider Chinese hypersonic technology, ICBM technology, underwater drones, and also in-flight drones to be actually amongst the most advanced, if not most advanced in the world. Therefore, they are watched very carefully as to the kind of sophistication that they may have, and then very often compared to the existing arsenal in the US and the West, so that because China is considered a near-peer competitor by the West, therefore they use the parade to gauge the kind of edge or the kind of counter-weapon systems that they may need to develop based on what they see that's on the display. But certainly it is very impressive, even to its rivals, and they are likely to sort of digest and analyze very carefully in the coming week. As to the effectiveness, only time can tell because, it has not engaged in a kinetic conflict since 1979.
There was also an emphasis on nuclear weapons. But why do you think China chose to spotlight this, given the reported corruption issues within the rocket force?
Well, the rocket force, issue has been widely publicized, and apparently they are, trying to install new leaders based on their meritocratic abilities. And given that, it's a black box, we are quite unlikely to know the machinery or the intrigues or the processes behind it. But what we do know is that China has ambitions to build up its nuclear arsenal, and certainly in its western region deserts, Western satellites have spotted construction of new silos. It is also constructing at least 100 nuclear missiles or warheads per year. And this is an attempt to reach operational parity with the U.S. Currently, both Russia and the U.S. has about 5,000 or so nuclear weapons each. They are the undisputed nuclear superpowers in the world. China has about 600 or so, and it is trying to catch up, according to some analysts, to reach about 1,005 or so, because by the time it reaches 1,005, it will reach numerical parity with the arsenal that the U.S. will have that is operational. Because even though they have over 5,000 nuclear weapons, at any point of time, most of them are in reserves or mothballed, and only 1,005 is operational. And by reaching parity with that number, that means China sits on the nuclear table as an equal.
Well, then how significant are these systems in terms of shifting the regional or global military balance?
They are extremely significant because especially two of the items are very much feared in the world. One would be the ICBMs, Intercontinental Ballistic Missile, and in at the military parade, we've actually seen the DF-61s, which are showed to the public for the very first time. These are massive weapons that have more than 10,000 kilometers of range, probably carrying, some would say up to 10 or so warheads, multiple re-entry independent vehicles, so they can strike several cities at the same time. And they fly very fast, over Mach 20 times the speed of sound. And so with such powerful weapon systems, they are able to reach any parts of the world within a very short time. time, and not many countries have actually anti-ballistic missile systems that can counter it other than the most advanced countries in the world. And then there is another category of nuclear-capable weapons, which are the hypersonic. This is being developed by all major powers. These fly very fast as well, at least more than 5 times the speed of sound. And unlike the ballistic missiles, they are very difficult to shoot down. They are very highly maneuverable. They don't need to fly a path into the space and then come down again in a trajectory. They can fly across the horizon and strike targets while being very difficult to detect and have stealthy features. Again, very few countries in the world that have counter weapon systems to shoot down hypersonics. Currently, as we stand, only Germany, France, US, maybe Russia, and Japan have such technologies. And I think amongst them, only Japan has successfully tested the defense system.
On a side note here, Professor, a Bloomberg investigation found that President Xi Jinping was orchestrating the biggest purge of military leadership since Mao Zedong. How unusual, then, is the scale of a military shakeup in China's modern history, and how does it compare with Mao Zedong's era?
Statistically, according to many reports, particularly from the West, it is unprecedented because the number of military personnel that has been dislocated numbers about 200. And it is apparently the largest number since the era of Mao Zedong, and therefore this is something unprecedented as well. So the sort of removal is accordance with what is termed as the anti-corruption campaign, which has seen even the topmost military leaders removed. Therefore, it remains to be seen, tactically speaking, whether this will have an impact, both positive and negative, on the deployment of the military, particularly if they were to carry out operational duties. And secondly, to see if the dislocation or replacement of such a military personnel will continue, or the bulk of which has been completed. So many are watching very intensely for future developments.
All right. I mean, it also raises another question, though. Is this a sign of political strength or of his weakness?
Well, there are two schools of thought. Those who see it as a weakness argue that the military leaders appears to be appointed or replaced according to ideological, party lines, as well as loyalty issues. Therefore, according to this school of thought, tactically speaking, this may not be the most optimal selection process of military leaders, particularly for tactical effectiveness. The other school of thought says that this is a consolidation of power over the military, and so this gives the commander-in-chief or the chairman of the Central Military Commission, in the case of China, the ability to consolidate his power over the military, particularly with the installation of loyalists, and this may make the orders that are issued down command hierarchy much more effective and with little dissent or opposition. And therefore, it can be carried out much more in a straightforward manner. So there are two schools of thought. Which school is going to triumph remains to be seen. As you know, the last time that the military has engaged in a kinetic conflict was in 1979. And it will probably need, some kind of scenario before the experts can sort of evaluate the tactical effectiveness of changes within the military leadership.
Well, some great insights from you there. Thank you so much, Professor, for your time and your insights today.
It's a pleasure. Glad to be here.
Thank you. That was Professor Lim Tai Wei, East Asian expert at Soka University. This has been The Big Story with me, Hongbin Jeong.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.